there, and welcome back to yet another Nice the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing The Royal Hotel. But just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but you prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, you are in luck, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify and Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to me on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check the podcast out visually on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, whatever you're watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there's always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it. The Royal Hotel. This is a film directed by Kitty Green, and if you're not familiar with that name, in 2020 she directed a film called The Assistant, which is basically a film that's a takedown on Harvey Weinstein. It's a film about the assistant to somebody who is this Harvey Weinstein figure, and this Harvey Weinstein figure in The Assistant is never said to be Harvey Weinstein, but it's heavily implied that it is. And that film is very unsettling, unnerving, and shocking, and it makes you feel angry. It's a very subtle film, it's a very nuanced film, but it makes you feel angry. And I watched it as part of my film course at uni, and I was surprised by how much I was taken by that film. It's a very, very good film. And this is her follow-up, as she reunites with Julie Garner, who played the protagonist in The Assistant, and she's playing the protagonist again here, Julie Garner, who many people might know from Ozark. I haven't seen Ozark, so I can't comment there. I think she played, like, the daughter in Ozark. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't seen the show, so I wouldn't know. But anyway, many people might know from Ozark. She was also in The Assistant, Kitty Green's last film, and she's leading Kitty Green's follow-up to The Assistant as well. And alongside Julie Garner, we also have Jessica Henwick, who I must admit I'm not overly familiar with. I saw her in Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery, the Knives Out sequel, which came out last year, and she was good in that, but she didn't have much screen time. She was Kate Hudson's assistant in that film, and she was good. She had a couple of comedic moments, but nothing. She didn't have a chance to shine that much in that film. She was good, but other people were better because he had more to do. And she's in this film though, and I was excited to see her in something that wasn't a comedy. And at the same time, we also have supporting roles from Hugo Weaving, which many people might know as Elrond from the Lord of the Rings films and the Hobbit films. He's actually in them as well. He also was in the Matrix films. He's been in loads. You have Hugo Weaving in this film, and Toby Wallace, who I first came acquainted with when I watched the show Pistol, all about the Sex Pistols, which was on Disney Plus last year and was directed by Danny Boyle, that series, and it was a really good series, and he was really great in it. So yeah, you've got quite an interesting cast there, and the IMDb plot synopsis goes as follows. Canadian backpackers Hannah and Liv, played by Julie Garner and Jessica Henwick, take a job in a remote Australian pub with some extra cash, and are confronted with a bunch of unruly locals and a situation that grows rapidly out of their control. And that's pretty much all you need to know about the Royal Hotel. These two young female adults go to this pub in Australia in the middle of nowhere and have to deal with some quite nasty males. And honestly, I found this to be a very, very good film. I was surprised by how intense I found it, how gripping I found it, and also how angry I was by the end of the film. Much like Kitty Green's last film, The Assistant, which I've already spoken about how much I liked, that film made me angry by the time I finished it. By the time I was walking out the cinema after watching this film, I felt emotionally drained because of how angry I felt by the end. I was like, God, it gets under your skin and it makes you feel frustrated and angry for what's going on to these female characters in the film, what's going on to the two female leads, and it leaves a lasting effect on you. I was taking the tram home after watching it in the cinema, and I couldn't stop thinking about this film to the point that I was listening to songs in the tram, and I wasn't really listening to the songs at the same time. I had my earphones in, but I was more just thinking about the film. That these songs just going by like that. I wasn't even paying attention to the music I was listening to because I was still thinking about the film. It leaves a lasting effect on you, and I was surprised by how visceral and nasty this film is. All the male characters in this film, all the male characters, I was about to say almost all the male characters. No, all the male characters in this film are animals. They act like animals. They act like they are fighting over who gets to mate with their female, and it's just, oh god, all of them are so... It's so uncomfortable to watch all the male characters in this film. It's so uncomfortable, and Hugo Weaving, who, I mean, I love him in Lord of the Rings films and so on and so on and so on, but in this film, he comes on screen and you know instantly that he's bad news, and he plays this alcoholic who helped run the Royal, the pub that the two lead female characters work in. He helps run the pub, and he is not a nice character though, and Hugo Weaving plays him very well. Same with Toby Wallace in this film. Many people might be familiar with Toby Wallace. I got a feeling, by the way, that by the time The Bike Riders, the upcoming Jeff Nichols film starring Austin Butler, Jodie Comer and Tom Hardy, by the time that comes out, I've got a feeling people will be familiar with Toby Wallace because I've already seen The Bike Riders and he plays quite an important role in that film. I saw it at the BFI Film Festival. Yeah, he's really great in that film. He's really, really good in it. And the role he plays in The Bike Riders, though, is not too dissimilar to the role he plays in this film. He's a character you're not really sure if you can trust in this film, and then as the film goes on, you know, when you first meet him, you're not sure if you can trust him. As the film goes on, you realise that you definitely can't trust him. And Toby Wallace plays that character very, very well. And the film feels authentic and it feels real. You feel like this pub actually exists. I heard somewhere that it was based on a true story. I think I heard that on a review of the film I heard from Mark Kermode on his podcast, on these extra takes in his podcast. Yeah, I think it's based on a true story. And that doesn't surprise me because so many pieces of this film, so many segments, even just the smallest details in this film feel real. The film is grounded in verisimilitude to the point that I felt like I was watching actual things happen. You know, I think it helps that there are not any huge actors in this film. Yes, we have Hugo Weaving, and he's very good in this film. But honestly, if I didn't know Hugo Weaving was in it, I might not realised, because he doesn't look like Hugo Weaving does. And I know Julia Garner has sort of blown up now because of Ozark, as far as I'm aware. I've seen a lot of not a lot of film festivals, a lot of TV awards ceremonies and whatnot. I know she's sort of blown up because of Ozark, but she's also not a huge actress, you know. If I said, she's not a household name, that's the point of me. She's not a household name, and neither is Jessica Henwick, at least as far as I'm aware. And I think that helps her. I'm not saying that as a criticism, and I do think one day Julia Garner will be a household name. And in this film, though, I think it helped that they weren't household names because it made me believe in the characters a lot more. I can't tell you how many films I've gone to watch at the cinema or on my TV or on streaming or whatever, and it had a famous actor in it. I just can't differentiate between the actor and the character they're playing. You know, plenty of times that's happened to me. And that didn't happen to me in this film. I felt like I was just watching these real life people. Some of these real life people being so incredibly nasty, and I keep going back to that word, but when you see this film, you know, you'll see what I mean. And I liked how real it felt, whether it was in the setting, whether it was in the storytelling, whether it was in the characters. So much of this film just felt real and scarily real at that. And the film itself, and this is going to sound like a criticism, but it's not. The film itself is like watching a car crash. And what I mean by that, I don't mean the film is badly made or anything like that. I don't think it's a bad film whatsoever. But what I mean by when I say watching the film felt like I was watching a car crash is this. It's a film which is uncomfortable to watch, and it has so many moments which you don't want to watch, but you can't turn away from at the same time because of the way the film is made. It's a very engaging film, whether it's through its writing, whether it's through its directing, its filmmaking, its storytelling, and all that jazz. It's a very engaging film. But at the same time, there's a lot of really dark and distressing things happening in it, and much like when you see a car crash on the motorway or something, you're fascinated by it. You can't turn away from it, can you? You're looking at it, and you shouldn't be looking at it. Deep down inside, that's quite an horrific thing that may have really injured someone. But at the same time, though, you're fascinated by it. At least I am whenever I see a car crash, and I think most people are as well. Whenever somebody sees a car crash, you shouldn't be looking at it, but you continue to look at it anyway. And that's how I felt whilst I was watching The Royal Hotel. I felt like I shouldn't be watching what was on screen, but I also felt like I couldn't turn away from it. And I mean that in the best way possible because of the way everything was being done. I was so captivated by it all, and I was captivated by the performances. Julia Garner, my God, that actress holds her own in so many moments, and she's so good. Every single time she's on screen, she holds your attention, and in a way that the film wants you to, if you know what I mean. She knows what she's doing with her performance. That's what I'll say. She knows what she's doing with her performance, and much like The Assistant, she holds your attention through her performance, much like her performance in The Assistant. She holds your attention again with her performance in this film, as she never really lets go. Jessica Henwick showing a lot more range. I've only seen her do comedy in Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery, the Knives Out sequel, and she was good doing comedy. She has a couple of comedic moments in this film, but you also see a very different side to her as an actor. I think she gives off a very good performance. I think everybody's great in the film in terms of performances. And I have heard some people criticise things that happen in the third and final act of this film, certain decisions that characters make, and they say they feel a bit irrational and don't really fit with the rest of the characters. And my defence to that, and I understand where people are coming from, there are some decisions from characters in the third act of the film which surprised me at first, but the more I think about it, the more I think that they're not irrational and they actually line up with the mental states of the characters by that point. Because by the third act, and not to go into spoilers here, and I'm not going to give anything big away, but by the third act, the characters' mental states, the main two characters, the lead two females, their mental states are lost both geographically and mentally. They don't really know what they're doing at this pub anymore. Not to go into details as to why, but yeah, they are lost both mentally and geographically. And the decisions they make, the more I think about them, the more, for me, they felt natural for those characters, with what they have gone through as well. The decisions were natural, and I've been in, some icky situations before. Not anything like the character in this film, not at all. But I've been in some icky situations before, and I've made some bad decisions. I think we all have in icky and tough situations. And I think that's what the female characters are doing at the end of this film. I think that's what the lead two women are doing at the end of this film. They're in a bit of a, not in a bit of a sticky situation. They're in a very, very, very sticky situation. I just don't think they're thinking straight, as anyone else would be. And so I think the third act of this film made complete sense, especially with the characters' decisions. And I really liked the way the film ended. I was sat there going, yes, that's how this film should end. And the funny thing is, it's a very different film than Casey Green's previous film, The Assistant, which I've already said I'm really fond of. I admire that film a lot because of how much it gets under your skin. And this film does as well, but in a very different way. The Assistant is a nuanced film. It asks, it makes you as the viewer zone in on certain details. And it does that very well, and it gets under your skin. And nothing really big happens in that film. But at the same time, though, it makes you angry. There's one scene with Matthew McFadden, which many people might know from Succession now. He played Tom in Succession. There's one scene with him in The Assistant, which makes you feel so unsettled and at the same time so angry. And that film does that really well. And at the same time, I would say that this film is a very good follow-up to The Assistant. You could watch these two films back to back. You could watch The Assistant and The Royal Hotel back to back. I think you'll have a very, very interesting viewing experience, because this film is very different to The Assistant, whether it's filmmaking, it's storytelling, it's very much in your face in this film. Well, it isn't actually. I take that back. It's not very much in your face, but a lot more happens. A lot more happens on screen, and you're shown things happening that you aren't necessarily shown The Assistant as much. Again, they're different films, but I would also say they would make quite a good companion piece. I think if you watch both films, you understand what I mean. I really do think you will. I think The Royal Hotel serves as a very good companion piece to The Assistant. I think it serves as a very good companion piece because both films focus on many of the same themes of women being marginalised, of the way they're treated by certain types of men who think they have more power because of the positions they're in. And both films really make you feel empathy and sympathy towards the female leads in ways that are uncomfortable but also important. I've already seen, and I don't usually use Rotten Tomatoes too much, but I'm going to refer to them here just because why not? I looked on Rotten Tomatoes before I did this podcast today to see what the critic rating was, and it has like a 90% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is great. I agree with that 90%, which I often don't with many critic ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. But the film has like a 40% audience rating. I can't remember right now, and I'm not going to look it up because I can't be bothered to look up Rotten Tomatoes audience rating. But I think a lot of that is just men going, "Oh, this film is showing that all men are bad and all that." It's not. It's just not. Regardless of what some pathetic, idiotic, incel males may say out there on the internet and whatnot, regardless of what some pathetic, and I mean pathetic males may say, men like this still exist. Men like we see in the Royal Hotel still exist, and I think that's why this film is very important. I think it's also why The Assistant is timeless, because it tackles all those themes very well, and I think this does something very similar. And so regardless of what some males may say out there, I'm telling you, men like this still exist. Men like we see in the Royal Hotel still exist in the real world. It's sad that they do, but they do. And the film, and also one other thing I want to say is that the film has a lot of characters in it which are drunk. And although this doesn't sound like a big thing, I believed in all the characters when they were drunk. I'm going to guess the actors weren't drunk when they were actually on set. I don't know for certain, but I'm going to guess the actors weren't drunk when they were on set, and yet I believed them all when they were drunk. And this film does a really good job at making you not like drunk people. I don't really like people when they're drunk whatsoever. I think it brings out a bad side to them, and I think this film taps into that. I think when people are drunk, to a certain point, you can be funny drunk and everything like that, but then when you're drunk to a certain point that's too much, it can bring out a dark side of you. And I think this film taps into that very well. And yeah, overall, I really liked this film. I thought it was a very good film, and I liked how under your skin it got, and I liked how it was unnerving. And it's stirring, the whole film is stirring this anticipation of dread. You don't really know where it's going, and you don't want to know where it's going, but at the same time, no, you do. And I think this film goes head first with all of that. And it's a really uncomfortable and unsettling watch, and an unnerving watch. You don't know where any of it's really going. Even the scenes which you think are kind of be more of a relax and watch. Something happens and it just like that, it will change the scene from being relaxing to unnerving, just like that. It's a really well done film, and I was really surprised by the lasting effect it had on me. I mean, I wasn't, because Kitty Green's last film, as what he said, her last film, The Assistant, had a very strong lasting effect on me, and this film did as well. I just wasn't expecting it to have such a lasting effect on me. I do think The Assistant is a bit better because it made me more angry and it did have more of a lasting effect overall, but this film is still very, very good, and it makes a very good companion piece to The Assistant. Yeah, watch both films if you really want to see, if you really want to feel anger towards certain types of men in the world. Yeah, this was a very, very good film. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that The Royal Hotel, I'm going to say it's a 9 out of 10. Seen some good films recently. I gave Naiad the other day, which is a film about strong women doing these incredible, remarkable things. I gave that film a 9.5 out of 10. That was a really great film. And I'm giving this film a 9 out of 10 because it's not too dissimilar. I mean, Naiad is a crowd pleaser, and it's a more feel-good film. It's a really good feel-good film. If you haven't seen that yet, I definitely recommend it, and go and check out my review of that if you haven't already too. But this film is not too dissimilar to Naiad in the way that you have these two female leads doing these, standing up to the forces that are trying to take them down. I wasn't expecting to compare The Royal Hotel to Naiad in this podcast today, but I just thought I might because I read it the other day. Right, so this is an add-on. One thing that I did put in my title of this podcast, but I forgot to explain what I was actually doing the podcast, and I just remembered to explain right after I finished recording this podcast, is this. The film makes you feel nervous. It makes you feel nervous for the characters because you don't know what's going to happen to them. And there are so many scenes where I was literally sitting on the edge of my seat because I didn't know what was going to happen to these characters. And I can't tell you how many films that hasn't happened. I don't feel nervous for the characters even though they're in dangerous situations. I constantly felt nervous for the characters. I constantly felt nervous as to what was going to happen to them. And the film experience itself, watching this in the cinema, the viewing experience was nerve-wracking more than I expected it to be. Yeah, it really gets under your skin and it makes you feel nervous. The film makes you feel nervous in so many moments. But the point I'm making is, I was really taken by the whole story, by the filmmaking, by how real this all felt, and I was just really captivated by the film overall, as I've already said quite a few times. It's a very, very good film, and if you can catch it in cinemas, I definitely recommend you do. It's a thriller, and it does get under your skin, and it has so many moments which, I mean, are very suspenseful and intense to watch. And if you can't see it in the cinemas, do check it out on stream. You think it'd be worth your while whenever it goes on to streaming. So yeah, I think it's a very good film, and I was surprised by the lasting effect it had on me very much. And so, as I've titled this podcast today, I'm going to say The Royal Hotel is a stirring thriller that makes you nervous and angry. And that is why it worked for me. It's a very, very good film, and I definitely recommend it. And so, all in all, as I've already said, I'm going to say that The Royal Hotel, I'm going to say that's a 9 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that is it for the podcast for today. So if you have seen The Royal Hotel, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. Maybe loved it, maybe hated it. Whatever your thoughts are on The Royal Hotel, please let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As what I said, thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast, and I suppose this is it. So I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye.